welcome to Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades. Josh just asked me to hit him, and I don't know why. I have no idea what
you got, old man.
I just got up sitting next to you.
What did you mean hit you anyway? That's your best you got, old man. That's wicked good. So why did you say hit me? What did you talking about?
No, because we're alternating who does the intro to the show each week. You waited till after we were live to tell me that it was my turn last week. So.
Yeah, I know. I do that deliberately because it's funnier.
Yeah.
It's a lot funnier, actually.
You think you're funny.
I am funny. I'm super funny. Ask Lynn. Lynn, tell him.
You are funny.
See? But she has to say that. She's running for office. I can get her to say pretty much anything
I've
right
never
now.
been a yes man.
No. Well, you couldn't be, actually. So anyway, today we have Lynne Blankenbeker, who is so awesome of you to go down and serve this country. You've been doing it forever, and then this COVID-19 thing came, and they called you into active duty to go serve on the USS Comfort in New York Harbor. Who I don't know if I'm sure you were super busy at the time, but it was who's that moron on MSNBC? Rachel Maddow.
Rachel Madcow.
Rachel Madcow. She was. Trump had said they were going to send the Comfort. Like it was. I think it was. My time frame is incorrect, but it was like on a Wednesday, and Rachel Maddow is on TV saying they can't possibly get that done even in a month. And all this other stuff within a few days, you're on your way, and you pull into harbor. I think about 4 or 5 days after he said it.
I think it was more like 2 days.
It was super close.
How fast that it took place after she said that.
Yeah.
Well, everything happened really fast. I got the call to go late Sunday night, and I was on the ship on Wednesday.
Wow.
And so late Sunday night, the call was all we need to know today is, can you go, and are you a key employee at a hospital or doing healthcare, COVID-related healthcare in your community? And so that was Sunday night. Then Monday morning, because I said, no, I don't work in a hospital, I wasn't doing COVID-related care here in the state, they said, okay, you're going. And that was on Monday, and I was on the ship on Wednesday. That's how fast it was. So if you don't think you can mobilize the active component, the reserve component, and the guard quickly, we can.
Well, that's exactly what it's there for, right?
Exactly.
It's for fast deployment. That's why it's in the particular port that it's in.
Right, and why we have one on East Coast.
Exactly. I was just going to say,
Right. And the ship it had come back from an exercise or a humanitarian mission, I believe. I believe they had gone down to Puerto Rico, and so they had come back in and they were getting some, maintenance work done on it, but they were able to pull it right out of the shipyard and put it right back into work, and we were sailing within days. And I think we left Saturday morning after we boarded the ship. I boarded the ship at, I think, 9 o'clock at night, Wednesday night, and we spent Thursday and Friday getting the ship ready to sail, and we took off. And President Trump flew out there and saw the ship off.
And were you in Baltimore? Where
no, we were in Norfolk, Virginia.
So it was in Norfolk. But even from Norfolk, I've sailed on naval vessels. Even from Norfolk to New York Harbor, it's less than a day.
It was a short trip. I think we got there either Saturday or Sunday. I lost track of the days, but I'll tell you how impressive that was. Taking the ship through the harbor, first of all, we sailed it in the ocean, and then we got to the harbor, and when we sailed past the Statue of Liberty, and as we came in, there were people lined up with big signs. People wrote on the sides of their building, "Thank you," as we sailed in. Do you remember Bob Burns? He ran for Congress in 2018. His sister lived in one of those apartments right there on the water, and she took a picture of us, and then he texted it to me, and he's like, "Look, we're watching you come in." It was just tremendous. Everybody was watching. People were excited. The ship's not named a Comfort by accident.
Right.
And it truly brought comfort to the people of New York City. I hope we get a chance to talk a little bit about the experience on the ship, because it was so tremendous.
So when at first the Comfort was sent in to take in people who were injured or had heart problems or other medical conditions other than COVID-19.
Correct.
And then after a while they said, no, we need you to take COVID-19
Within
patients.
days.
Within days.
Yes.
And how difficult was that transition?
Well, it was, first of all, if you've ever been inside the ship is just a very large vessel that's open bay situation. And so our ICUs, it's just bed lined up after bed lined up after bed lined up. And the wards are bunk beds, the regular, patient wards. And so they have racks, and you just pull the one down above you, and you just pull down like sleeping on a regular military ship with these big open bays. So it's really not designed to take a respiratory virus that can travel quickly in the air, and especially when you can't get people 6 feet apart. And a bunk bed situation is not a good situation for COVID,
Correct,
right?
yeah,
With
yeah.
a respiratory infection. And we didn't have a negative pressure ventilation system. So the air recirculated within there in the hull of the ship, because it was an old tanker that they gutted and made into the ship. The ship is perfect for battlefield injuries or people with traumatic injuries who aren't contagious or don't have an infectious disease. So you can imagine when we had to divide the ship up into different units, we had to have COVID and non-COVID wards, and then we had to have some way to make a barrier there. Now, our ICUs, we did have separate walled off areas. So we were able to put all the COVID patients in one ICU and all the non-COVID patients in another ICU. And then we do have 11 isolation beds that did have a negative pressure
Right,
rooms.
okay.
And that's where we did our procedures that would really aerosolize folks who had COVID, the bronchoscopies and stuff like that. We opened a 5th ICU, so we converted the recovery room to a 5th ICU that could be a step down for all the recovering patients who were non-contagious. So we were very busy. I know the news says we weren't.
Yeah, the news said it was basically a vacation for you guys.
No. As a matter of fact, we worked 12-hour days every single day. So I was a nurse in the operating room. We did 100 surgical procedures. I did over 260 hours in the operating room of surgical time. We did procedures from ruptured appendixes to diabetic foot ulcers. We did people who had abdominal issues. We put in a lot of feeding tubes and a lot of tracheostomies for patients who were coming from long-term care situations and needed those procedures, but the civilian hospital wasn't able to provide those for them.
Right.
And so these were patients with chronic conditions. Like we took care of a young man. He was young, and I believe he was 14 years old when he was shot in the back in gang violence. And so he was paralyzed from basically the chest down. And now here it was, several years later, and he was developing bed sores, and he needed those fixed, and he was having some eating problems and stuff. And so we were that wasn't a COVID patient, that was just a patient who needed some care for his family to take better care of him at home or at the long-term care facility that he was going to, but the civilian hospitals weren't taking care of those injuries or
Right,
those
because
illnesses.
they're all geared up theoretically for COVID-19.
Right. Well, and the hospitals really didn't have a bed problem. They had plenty of beds, and they didn't have a ventilator problem. They had a staffing problem. So after the Comfort got there, we were the first military group to get there. And we assessed the need, and we identified what the problem was. We sent in a Navy Expeditionary Medical Facility, which is a roughly 500 doctors, nurses, corpsmen, those types of people. And they went to the Javits Center, which is just a big convention center that was converted into a hospital. And then the Army mobilized an entire medical brigade. That's huge. I don't even know how many people that is, but it's big. And they were supposed to set up a field hospital in New York City, but what they quickly realized was they didn't need all those beds, and they didn't need people in tents in beds. What they needed was those staff members in the hospital. And one thing that President Trump did that I think is so tremendous is he was able to break down that barrier so that my nursing license in New Hampshire was good in New York, and I didn't have to get relicensed in New York.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Because, he was able to fix it so that we could get people, professionals, medical professionals, to point of care and not worry about the state lines, right?
Okay.
And so that was tremendous, and I hope that sticks.
I wouldn't think that would be an issue anyway if you were on a ship. You're on a naval vessel.
Except for we were taking care of the people of New York City who were civilians. So it's different when we go to, say, Vietnam or to another country, because we don't, even though we still use high standard, good quality care, we use the American standard of care on them, there isn't the same expectation as it is in the United States. And we were still in the United States taking care of people from New York City. And so what we were able to do was take our military and our non-military folks and put them into those hospitals, and they were able to provide care. And so it was tremendous for the city of New York City. For the people of New York City.
Did you find New York City to be as in bad shape as we were led to believe? There were, freezer trucks full of dead bodies all over the place.
I never saw anything like that. And those ditches that they said they were digging, we never saw anything like that. I think they had obviously in the nursing homes and the long-term care facilities, they did have a problem, just like the whole entire globe has had with that elderly, vulnerable population. But no, as a matter of fact, it was pretty fascinating, because once the COVID patients came on board, which was pretty quickly after we got there, within the first week, we changed the routing in the hospital to red zones and green zones. Now, you said you've been in a ship before. Yeah. So you've been in a Navy ship, so there's ladder wells that go to everything, and you will climb ladder rails. You'll be in great shape when you're all done on a Navy ship. And so we closed off certain hallways, certain passageways. We closed off certain stairwells to only be one direction, and there were paths for the staff and then paths for the patients. And so we didn't mix COVID with the non-COVID throughout the ship. But they took 500 of us. There were about 1,000 crew on the ship, but they took about 500 of us and put us in a hotel. And we were bussed in every day. So at 6 o'clock in the morning, I'd get up. I'd get out of my hotel room, put my mask on. I'd grab my breakfast. It was a boxed breakfast, because they wouldn't even let us eat in the galley anymore. They didn't want any cross-contamination across the ship. They would bus us in. We'd get on the ship. We'd go straight to our department, and I'd work all day. And then at 7 o'clock at night, when our shift was done, I would go off the ship, and then I'd grab a boxed dinner on my way into my room. And then we went straight to our hotel rooms, and then we didn't leave. We weren't allowed to leave.
You weren't allowed to walk around New York at all?
No, because they didn't want to, for safety, and then they didn't want us
de Blasio's rule or Cuomo's rule?
I think that was a Navy rule. But so we were in our room. So I basically had been in isolation since early April, when you think about it, other than going to and from work. But it was funny, because we could watch New York City wake back up. And so when I first got to Times Square, and I was in my hotel, because the pier is right off of Times Square, and I'd look out my window and there was nobody on the street. And then every day, as we got a little bit closer and closer to recovery, you'd see like this deli open, and you'd see, the CVS open, and you started seeing people walking on the streets. And the folks in New York City were so tremendous. They'd see us getting on the bus in the morning, and they would run up to us on the bus, and they would say, "We love you. Thank you for coming." And it was a tremendous experience.
So news reports told us that not a whole lot of patients were treated in total on the Comfort.
We took care of 185 patients.
Okay.
And to me, that's pretty significant. Because,
I think the way the media played it was that it was billed as a ship that has a capability of 1,000 beds.
It does.
And so you get folks like the mainstream media tell us that they treated less than 200 people. They didn't even reach a quarter of capacity.
Well, had we put 1,000 people with COVID on that ship, or COVID and non-COVID, the people of New York would have been very, very upset, because they would have been lined up so close together.
It would have re-exacerbated the problem.
It would have been terrible.
Of a nursing home where you're all bunched up together, and into a ship where you're all bunched up together.
Well, even in a nursing home, usually people are one or two to a room, and so you can contain it in a room.
Can I just interject?
Sure.
So what you had, if the problem is, we were back here looking at news. So the news starts out with, Trump, there's no way he's going to get that ship there in time. The ship was there ahead of time. There's no way, they're not going to do anything anyway. And basically what it is Trump was doing the best he could to help the people of New York, even though the media was going to do whatever they could to downplay
Absolutely.
anything he did. So the crux to the story is you guys were doing yeoman's work. See, I know some naval terms.
There you
right
go.
there.
You did. You got it.
See, once in a row. And yet they're going to downplay it like, oh, it was like almost to give the impression to the American people that, Trump was wasting money sending the ship there.
No, but you've got to remember from a military perspective, and I don't think this was part of the mission, but this is the collateral, right? When you see the big white ship sail into the New York harbor, and it's called the Comfort, that in and of itself tells America, we're taking care of you, right? And that sends out a level of calm. And you can't put a dollar figure on it.
That's my point, is that image of the Comfort coming in to the rescue is as if Trump's coming to the rescue, and they can't abide by that, so they've got to downplay the image.
And Gary was alluding to it. The progression of what we saw on the news was, oh, they'll never send the ship there. It can't mobilize. Then the next one was, oh, well, they got there, but they're not taking any COVID patients, which is really where the need is. Oh, now they're taking COVID patients, but they're not taking a whole lot of COVID patients.
I know.
Oh, now they're leaving, and it's still not open yet. We're still shut down. Right, so that was the progression of the news, and so it was all bad. It was all meant to make it as bad as possible.
Well, it was a tremendous mission, and I will tell you, it was a tremendous mission.
I'm telling you, that's the image that's been projected to us, whether we believe it or not.
Well, that's why I get to tell the truth, right? Because I'm not the media, and I don't have any agenda, and I get to tell the truth. But the other piece of that is, and you got to really think about this. When I was at the Pentagon from 2012 to 2015, and again when I was at the Defense Health Headquarters from 2016 to 2018, my job in the military was military policy and planning. And so we had to plan for disasters, whether it was a pandemic, a biologic attack on our nation, whether it was a chemical attack, whether it was a nuclear attack, because all of that has a medical component to it. And we have to look at, do we have the capabilities within this country to decontaminate and to contain and to do, all those things. So let me tell you something. If there was a terrorist out there who thought they were going to drop a biologic on the country of the United States, think about the deterrence of getting the Mercy and the Comfort mobilized within hours, right? We had those ships moving pretty quickly, and we had medical resources dispersed across this nation so quickly. While we were sitting in New York City, we were already planning to send an EMF to New Orleans, an EMF to Miami, an EMF to Chicago, wherever we needed to send them. People already had their bags packed at home, ready to go, waiting for the go order. So we are ready. We are ready in this nation to handle any kind of medical emergency. Your military is ready to stand up. And I only knew the Navy piece of it, but the Army pulled it off with the brigade. And so we are ready. And I think that sent a huge message across the globe that the United States is ready.
That's actually pretty remarkable, because that is exactly contrary to the story that we've been hearing.
I know, but we were.
I know. I get that.
Yeah, I mean, it speaks to the readiness, right? And it speaks to, we didn't really, throughout this entire process, we didn't really have a massive shortage of medical personnel or medical equipment, because we hear stories now of entire mobile Army hospitals that were packed up and sent home, having never treated a single patient. Right. But the fact is, it was there and it was ready. This thing did not explode the way the experts said it was going to explode. But had it done that, we've had multiple Army hospitals, naval facilities. All of these things were open and ready to take these patients. And then it was, oh, wait a minute, we don't really need this at this moment, but it was prepared.
Sure, it was prepared, and it was good exercise for us to get out there, see how quickly we could move people in a digital world where, you don't need a paper push. I don't need to hand you paper orders. I didn't need somebody physically signing something. It also gave us an opportunity to exercise how fast could we get those tents up. How fast could we get those tents, and how fast could we get in and get out? And do we have the resources for all kinds of things?
How fast can you change the mission from non-COVID to COVID?
Right. And, and so that was a good exercise for us as well, for readiness, to be able to, go out there and do this without it being an exercise. It was real world, and it had a sense of urgency to it. We learned a lot of lessons, no doubt. As you always do in these types of missions, we do these things called after action reports. And all of the lessons learned will come back, and we'll be ready again. And we'll be even more prepared next time. So a lot of really good things without getting into the minutia of how quickly to mobilize an individual, turn on a pay account, those sorts of things. But it all worked seamlessly, and they did a tremendous job all the way around getting us out there.
And I think that's something that isn't highlighted is the fact that the military was able to do all these things, that the country as a whole was able to mobilize and step up to a challenge that may or may not have been as bad as we thought it was going to be, but we still stepped up.
Absolutely.
We had these doom and gloom news stories. All right, we don't have enough medical personnel. We don't have enough equipment. We don't have enough PPE. But then what happened was the Army stepped up, the Air Force stepped up, the Navy stepped up. Right, we got everybody deployed. Everybody who was available got out there and was ready to help. We were set up. We were ready to go. Manufacturers around the country, civilian manufacturers,
Absolutely.
retooled, including my own wife's company right here in Manchester, Coreflex, retooled to start producing face masks and face shields.
Hand sanitizer came from distilleries.
Right, and all the beer companies in the state started making hand sanitizer.
Right.
So this perceived shortage and inability for us to step up to a challenge is complete bull hockey.
No, I think we're
because the country came together, both military and non-military.
Absolutely.
And that's something that
I think
that folks don't realize is going to happen, or the media doesn't want you to know is going to happen in an emergency.
I think there's a bunch of things that went into misunderstanding the situation. And I think most of the information we had at the outset was wrong, and that's what kind of screwed everything up.
Well, the models were, we were basing the models on, everybody was chiming in, this university, that model, that, China wasn't very forthcoming. I think we've learned a lot from this.
The first chunk of information came from Italy, which was horrible.
Right. And so, so they were trying to build a model, and they were trying to predict, and they were way overestimated. But, and that speaks to why we got so many people in the military at the ready, and then ended up sending them home because we didn't need them. Once we realized that we didn't need to build hospitals, we only need to put staff in them, all those hospital builders got to go home, and so we started figuring that whole piece of it out too. And so the ship had a lot of value because when we got there, we were ready to go as soon as we got there. We had 12 operating rooms. We had 6 of them up and running. We didn't use the last 6. It was never intended to be a surgical mission, and we were actually quite busy. And but that was never intended to be a surgical mission. We really wanted an OR complement there in case we had emergency gunshot wounds, or in case one of the staff needed a surgical procedure, fell down the stairwell, needed some orthopedics, maybe an appendix, something like that. I took care of one man, though. I always love to talk about this man. He was so, so kind. An older gentleman who was a diabetic, and so definitely at risk for having a significant poor outcome with COVID, according to the models. And so this man came in, and we tested him, and he tested positive, but he had no symptoms. And he was my patient, and we did his surgery, and he only needed a minor surgery, but without the surgery, he could have had a really, really horrible outcome, and he couldn't get into the hospital to have it. And as we were operating on him, and because he was awake, I had an opportunity to chat with him a little bit, and then I was his recovery room nurse as well. And as I was sitting there with him, he told me that during 9/11, he escaped the World Trade Center alive, and he ran down that infamous stairwell. And when he got down the stairwell, he met his son. His son was also in the building, and they frantically searched for his daughter-in-law, who they never found. And he said the hardest day of his life was burying an empty casket. And his son and his daughter-in-law had a 1-year-old, and so then he committed the rest of his life, to helping his son raise this little boy, this little orphan boy, or sort of orphaned. And his gratefulness was unbelievable. unbelievable. This was a man who had been through a lot, right? New York City had not been very kind to him over the years, and yet he was so grateful we were there. And as I was pushing him in his wheelchair back to his room, which was in the wards, it's not a room, it was the wards. And I said to him, I said, well, you didn't go to sleep. You'll get some food. Well, I'll get you some lunch. And he said, oh, good. He goes, your hospital food is so good here. He's like, ship food is better than hospital food. And it's just his, the first group of people to come on the ship were scared. And I would be too. You're getting on a big white military ship. And who thinks that there's going to be state-of-the-art care on that ship? And they were frightened, but this, once the word got out, it was great. They were really fabulous people.
I always have heard stories, and I don't know what the truth is, but the quantity of people that actually died because they weren't getting routine care. In other words, the hospitals around the country were shut down and just geared towards COVID. So the diabetic wasn't getting treated. This guy with, this problem, chronic problem, wasn't being treated. That the death toll from that is actually quite high, but I
haven't seen the data on it yet, so I don't know. But it wouldn't surprise me.
Right.
I'll say that. Yeah.
Because I know I foregoed, regular doctor's appointments because you didn't want to go near a hospital or a doctor.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think all that's going to start coming back around now that the crisis is over, and we're seeing fewer and fewer cases, and people are feeling a little more comfortable getting out and about.
Yeah.
So definitely.
Is there anything else you want to cover about the hospital experience?
No, it was just tremendous. Thank you. It was good to get an opportunity to talk about that. I do think we learned a lot about China, and as a congresswoman, we got to pay attention to that. We are very dependent on China for pharmaceuticals. We are very dependent on China for PPE. Those sorts of things we need to get back into manufacturing back in this country, put people back to work here, and get rid of our dependence on China.
Well, wouldn't it be equivalent to make sure some of that manufacturing is elsewhere, maybe in Indonesia, India?
Israel's doing a lot of it. Top 5 is
Israel.
Israel does a lot of.
But I'm saying, in other words, if the supply chain was diverse enough, it wouldn't matter.
Yeah, no, I agree. But I do think that we can get some of that manufacturing back in our country, so we're not 100% dependent on import.
Right.
Yeah,
Totally agree with that. Yeah.
And I can't wait to get to Congress and get on science and technology so we can pull the string on this and do an investigation. I'd really like to see what happened in China and get the facts on how we got here as a nation.
Yeah. It would be nice it would be comforting to know, and I'm sure some part of this is already in place, but as a congresswoman, maybe you can help make sure of it for the future. If at the very least, critical manufacturing products, things like you said that are in China that we bring it back home. At the very least, we want a diverse logistical chain to begin with. But at the very least, if we've identified a particular item as critical to national security, that there's at least 1 or 2 facilities in the country, in the continental U.S. that can manufacture it, as opposed to this particular item can only be manufactured in China.
I think
I'll tell you what.
There's another variable that you, as a congresswoman, I hope you look into, and there has to, because I know you are, and I know everybody at this table is totally free market person. However, one of the problems we had in New Hampshire, at least, and I'm sure it was true around the country, is very wealthy people bought up all the PPE they could and started scalping. So you take, I totally get why somebody wants to make a profit. Absolutely wonderful idea. But when you take a $2 item and then turn around and try to sell it to the government for $20,
right,
it's scalping, and scalping at a time of emergency. There should be some profound.
Well, there's got to be, there's
jail time or
something. Well, and there are fraud statutes that are supposed to prevent that from happening.
And there were a couple of people who got caught up in that fraud.
Yes.
And told either donate it or we're taking it away from you. But another thing, you said that there's very rich people who were buying these things up in bulk and then rescalping them. There was also the other side, and this one really annoyed me, and I'm going to go ahead and say the name, right? But it's celebrities looking for a photo op, right? Matthew McConaughey and his wife, they magically found a resource for PPE for their local hospital that their local hospital couldn't find. And so my question is, how much did he pay to grab up all this PPE so that he could stand on that sidewalk in a mask and say, here's some PPE that I found for you guys and I'm donating to you.
See how wonderful I am.
He didn't recharge for it, but he used it. He used his wealth as like, if you were able to find that supply chain, why didn't you point it out to everybody else in the country? Instead, you bought it personally and used it as a photo op. But that one really annoyed me. It wasn't just him, but it was celebrities in general doing that. Oh, I bought some PPE and I'm donating it. Well,
there's corruption everywhere, right? The funny thing is all those years that I did those tabletop drills and we talked about pandemics and, public health crises in this nation, the one thing we never, ever considered was the toilet paper crisis. No, I say that seriously, but we never considered the toilet paper crisis. And when I sat back, because, that's where my mind is doing this policy development and figuring out how we're going to solve this problem as a nation, I thought to myself, what drove people to freak out about toilet paper? And the answer is the media. And one of the things in all of our tabletop drills, we always talk about, you got to set up a command center and you've got to do this and you got to make sure you have these supplies and how do we access the people and how do we, funnel people in the right direction and beds and contamination and decontamination and blah, 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 blah. But we would always say we're going to put the media over here in a little media holding area to control the media getting into us. But what we didn't control was the message. And I think there has to be a serious conversation about controlling that message, because how else did the hysteria get out there? It was like overnight. Oh, we got COVID, better go buy toilet paper.
I think the hysteria, toilet paper in specifically, comes from a general fear of communism, fear of socialism, fear of anarchy. Because we've grown up accustomed to, hey, socialism, and you get a picture of Russians in the 1960s standing in line for toilet paper and bread.
Yeah.
Right? And those are the two things that everybody was standing in line for when things were really, really, really bad. And I think that kind of drove the toilet paper shortage.
Probably did,
We had General Bulldog on. And I forgot to ask him. I had this question that I thought was so great, and I forgot to ask him. And it was, when you were riding to attack the Taliban on horseback, how many rolls of toilet paper did you and your...
Did you have a pack full? Yeah.
You get it in your MRE.
Oh.
Yeah? So have you ever had an MRE?
You do.
Yeah.
It's small.
You get a few sheets. You got to be careful with it. Use it wisely. Yes, but you do get every MRE comes with toilet paper.
Oh, okay.
Comes with this little tiny few sheets of toilet paper.
Oh, that's special.
Yes, nothing like giving you toilet paper.
Oh,
with
yeah. It's pretty luxurious.
It was definitely an adventure. And then I tested positive for COVID. I don't know if you knew that.
No, I
am
didn't.
not. I do not have COVID now. But yeah, so that's a risk you take, right? But when I knew when I was going out, two things I knew for certain and for sure. Three. The people of New York needed my skill set, and that was evident when I got there. Number two, I was going to have to shut down my campaign. And number three, I ran the risk of getting COVID. And but 1 and 2 I knew for certain and for sure. And so I didn't mind shutting my campaign down at all. I didn't know how long I'd shut it down for. I knew there were going to be consequences not being able to campaign when everybody else was going to be able to campaign, even in a limited capacity. But I've always run toward a fight. I've never been the run and hide kind of girl. And I've also always done what's right. And that was right. I've always put people over everything, and that includes politics. And so I ran to the fight, and I went. The COVID thing, I had plenty of PPE. I wasn't worried. I don't think I actually caught COVID, but I'll never know. I do have.
Wait. Clarify that. So you're saying on one hand you said you tested positive.
I did test positive.
And on the other hand you don't believe you ever had it.
I don't know if I had it. I don't believe I caught COVID. I probably got exposed to COVID, which gave me a positive test, but I never got the illness.
Oh,
right?
Okay. So you were never
You've got
symptomatic.
an entire set of COVID tests that are coming back as all false positives
Right.
now.
Well, did you see what India did?
So the question is, how accurate was the test that you actually
So
took?
India sent in PCR tests on a papaya, a goat, I believe, and something else. And they all came back positive for COVID, right? Which is so funny. But anyway, no, what happened for me was
I hate papayas with COVID.
April 22nd, I had a really stuffy nose. And we were wearing the N95 masks, and it's very uncomfortable to have a really stuffy nose under a mask. And I only know that date because I wanted some nasal spray to get rid of. I thought it was allergy, right? And so that's the only symptom I had. So I went to sick call, and they didn't swab me and didn't take my temperature. They listened to the symptoms and said, here, take some Flonase. And they gave me some Flonase, so my box had the date on it. That's how I know what the date was. And I used the Flonase for a day or two, and I was fine, and I was back in my mask, and everything was hunky and dory. I had no fever. I was good. And then April 29th, we were all leaving New York City. They took my temperature, and they tested me. I tested negative, and I had no temperature. So that was 7 days after, if the stuffy nose was a symptom. I definitely should have tested positive on April 29th, because that is within the window of when I should have tested positive. Then I was in quarantine for 14 days. That was that restriction of movement that we hear about here. And I was with 123 other people who tested negative. And I tested positive on my repeat test on May 12th. So then I went into isolation. Now, let me tell you something. Navy isolation is a no-joke thing. They put you in a hotel room, and you are not allowed to leave for any purpose. Your foot cannot cross the threshold of your door. And so 3 times a day, somebody knocked on my door and brought me food. And I had a blue dot on my door that identified me as a COVID
Was it a nice
patient.
room, though?
No.
No.
Anyway.
No.
Anyway, so I couldn't keep any food in the room. I got rid of it as soon as,
Was it a civilian hotel?
No.
Or was it a...
No.
Okay.
But...
So it wasn't the Hilton?
No, it was not the Hilton. And so I stayed in there for 14 days. They retested me, and I tested negative, and then they tested me again 72 hours later, and I tested negative, and then I came home. So...
So do you think maybe the first test was just wrong?
Well, I think there's a number of scenarios. Either my first COVID test was wrong, was a false negative, or my second test was a false positive. We'll never know, because one of the things they didn't do was test me every 48 hours or retest me again. And if I had had a negative, then they could have gone, all right, well, let's do a third test or fourth test and see if that's negative. But they didn't do that, so we'll never know. The interesting thing, though, is the Navy reported me to the CDC as a positive test.
They're reporting everybody.
Because they have to report
gets
everybody.
reported
So
now.
they reported me as a positive test. Because the test was done at Portsmouth Naval Hospital, they reported me to the Virginia Department of Health, who reported me to the CDC. And while I was in isolation, I got a phone call from New Hampshire's public health department saying, we just got word you tested positive for COVID, and we're reporting you to the CDC. So my
reported.
one positive got reported 3 times to the
Wow.
CDC. So I'm like I got the trifecta.
You get the trifecta.
So I don't know now what the actual data looks like. That was my personal experience.
So
Wow.
So let's take that. Does the CDC know that you were a triple report?
I have
Or
no
was
idea.
it 3 different Lynne Blankenbekers as far as their
I have no idea. It was
spreadsheet
one from
goes?
Virginia, one from the Navy, and one from...
Because now I'm wondering how accurate are the CDC numbers
right. And
that just kept ballooning up and up and up.
So I don't know. I don't know. All I know is, and then what you have to know about that PCR test, the nasal swab. The swab, the test is either detected or non-detected. So it doesn't tell you if the virus is reproducing, if it's multiplying and it's active, or if it's dormant or dead, right? And so the test looks for the RNA that the virus sheds. So I could shoot you and you could lie there dead for 5 days. I could come pull any of your cells, and they would have your DNA, but you'd be dead. And you couldn't hurt anybody or you couldn't do anything, right? But your cells would still show your DNA. So people, as they shed the non-active virus, the non-contagious virus, still test positive. Because they only look for the RNA. They don't look for, do you have a contagious virus in you?
Okay.
And so it's not a really great test.
So it's a swab. You get the
Have you ever
the
had the
RNA.
swab?
I haven't, but I understand it's not very pleasant. So it's not like an influenza test where it's cultured. It's not cultured. Because a cultured test tells us that it's alive and it's reproducing.
Right. This is not a culture. This is I'm looking for evidence of RNA, dead cell or live cell, or dead active reproducing cell or not.
So there's more inaccuracies to the data that we have. We've
PCR
got people
is in
being reported multiple times to the CDC. And of course, those being reported to the CDC can literally be tens, hundreds, thousands even, who are folks who just have it on them because they brushed up against somebody.
Or punch somebody.
Or, if, so when the specimen is taken, it depends on what test you use and how they do it. But one of the methods is to take this, it looks like a very small bottle brush, and they stick it up in your nose and it goes back into your
all the way back.
Nasopharynx. And then they put it in this vial and they break the top. So if the person who is testing multiple people doesn't change their gloves, and they tested you, and you had live virus and you're breathing, right? And you just breathed the virus onto their fingertips, and they put it in the vial and break it and put the cap on. You're going to test positive, and I come after you and I'm negative, and the same person, without changing their gloves, tests me and sticks their hand in there and breaks it off. Any virus that's on the end of their fingers could shed into the vial. So again,
it leaves a lot to be desired.
If
But
people
Lynn,
aren't using good technique.
Lynn, we're going to run out of time before you tell us about your campaign, how to get in touch with you, what you're going to do.
www.blankenbeker.com, BLANKENBEKER. So
That's a lot of letters.
I know. Our campaign is back up and running. We have been going about 10 days. We've been aggressively fundraising. It's been really super hard. So if folks are inclined to donate, every dollar matters. That's really where we are right now. I've been endorsed by Dan Crenshaw, who's a representative from Texas, by Michael Waltz, who's a representative from Florida. He's a Green Beret. I've been endorsed by Mike Gallagher, and he is also prior military. I have the endorsement of Maggie's List and ViewPack and War Veterans Fund. So we're well on our way. We have solid endorsements. Tomorrow, a big announcement is coming out. I launched my 100 veterans who are supporting our campaign last week, and we have a solid, rock solid structure. We have 8 counties in CD2 that we represent, and I have a county and town chair all in all the counties and in all the major towns. And so they're helping keep the structure of the campaign going and helping me out in all those areas. So we have depots for all our stuff. We have a rock solid campaign. We just need money. So if folks want to donate, that's where they can do it. If folks want to help, you can go right on our website, www.blankenbeker.com, and there's places to volunteer as well. We'll take all the help we can get. We're going to have a true grassroots effort. Just hired a new digital guy. Do you know John DePietro? He's on Team Lynn now. We just hired him, and he is really ramping up our website. So we're going to have some really cool videos on there, and because we know it's a digital world now, and so that's where we are.
Well, so the thing is, so the viewers know, I've known Lynn for I don't know how many years, 10 years anyway. I think.
We've known each other a long time. 2008, maybe.
Oh, so 12. Okay,
12,
yeah. So, and I'm crazy about her, and I'm supporting her because I just want somebody in DC who gets it, who cares, who has, conservative basic values. That's the baseline, but what you need is people who really care about the people in New Hampshire to go represent us instead of people who care about, special interests and drug companies and crap like that. But the thing people can also do is just sharing your posts on social
Absolutely.
media, from Twitter to Facebook or whatever, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically free advertising.
Oh, absolutely. Like and share everything we post. That's a really good way. It doesn't take much of your time, and it's easy to do, and it's free. I think there's going to be new issues going forward in Congress. I think one of the biggest issues is still going to be healthcare reform. I don't know how you can send somebody to Congress who doesn't have a background in healthcare like I have, healthcare legislation, healthcare law. I'm a healthcare attorney, healthcare delivery, and healthcare policy development at the highest level. So I really want to go and be part of a historic legacy of quality, accessible, affordable healthcare plan for this country. And I don't mean the government running our healthcare. I mean breaking down those barriers, just like President Trump is doing. He set a really good example, breaking down a barrier to get quality healthcare to point of care. And that's what we need. And so I'm looking forward to working with whoever our president is for bringing a good, affordable health care plan to the people of this country. Of course, national defense is always important to me. I've worn a uniform for 34 years. People ask me all the time when I was on the ship, are you a Republican or a Democrat? And I told them always, I am an American first. I have protected and defended the Constitution and the people of this country for 34 years, and I will always be an American and put America first. And I am sickened to see with our Congress trying to watch America fail. It is unconscionable.
They're not just watching; they're actively participating
and making our country fail. And I was sitting next to a Russian woman on a plane recently.
Oh no! Here we go. Did you see that?
It's the Russian connection.
That's it.
Collusion. And she was sitting very quietly, and she heard me talking to the gentleman behind me about my campaign. And finally, she said to me, "Are you a Republican or a Democrat?" And I said, "Well, I'm a Republican." And she goes, "Oh, good." She goes, "Let me tell you my immigration story." And she said she was a refugee from Russia 30 years ago. She came in when the Iron Curtain came down, and she said. It took her a while to get here, and she naturalized. She became a citizen. She had 3 children here. Her 3 daughters, one's a professor, 2 are lawyers, so they're contributors. She got really involved in her church, and she said to me, please, please do something about illegal immigration. She said, this country is and don't let socialism come here. She said, America is the only beacon of hope. And if we take away capitalism and freedom and liberty, and all that America is, there's no place left for immigrants like me to come.
And that's the story you get when you speak to every single legal immigrant. From socialist or communist
Absolutely.
locations.
Absolutely.
Every single one of them will give you the same story. Don't allow the illegal immigration to continue because it will tear down, like you said, the last beacon of hope in the world.
That's right. That's right.
But we don't hear that.
But when I was sitting in isolation and my liberty was completely restricted, even prisoners get an hour a day outside. And for the first 10 days, I didn't get any outdoor time. I had to leave my window open to stand in front of it and get fresh air. But, I could have done like our congresswoman did and do a sit-in on the House floor or sit in my hotel room and throw a temper tantrum, but I didn't do that. I took that opportunity to research the law, I think God works in mysterious ways. He put the only nurse or the only medical person in the Navy inventory that's admitted to the bar, the Supreme Court of the United States, in isolation. So I put that knowledge to good use, and I researched what the constitutional constraints were and what the limitations were for restricting somebody's liberty during a public health crisis.
Right.
And I learned a lot about that. And I also pulled the CDC guidelines. And then I compacted that into a brief, and I gave that up our chain of command. I gave it to the admiral in charge, and she took that forward, and they shaped policy going forward to make sure that they offered us and afforded us maximum freedom within the guidelines of the CDC direction and what is right for public safety.
Right.
And so I used that time wisely, and that's what leadership is called. And I took that opportunity while I was isolated and had internet to use my leadership and do something. It didn't benefit me, but you know who it benefited? All those sailors who came behind me, because now they had a different policy that was a little less restrictive and still good for public health. And that's what we need going to Congress, is we need that kind of leadership who's going to work with people, take all that knowledge, and make sure that we protect and preserve our freedoms that make us uniquely American.
So in creating that brief, tell us a little bit about what did you find as far as what the rules are, how restrictive an emergency order can be.
So, under a public health crisis, the Supreme Court and constitutionally says that yes, sometimes you have to restrict people's liberty, but it can't be arbitrary, it can't be overly oppressive, and it can't be unreasonable. And there's always a test, right?
Right.
And then they say, and so those words are words of art. They're legal words of art that we would then, kind of work our way through. But so that's a good framework to go by. And then you have to look at, do people understand why they're being isolated? And so you have to inform people. And you also have to afford them the opportunity for counsel so that they can ensure that their constitutional protections, they're being protected under the Constitution. And so that's kind of what I learned from it. And then I, of course, went into much more detail. But
as somebody who was a member of the military, was your liberty, were they able to restrict yours more so?
Well, it depends. So, there's a legal thing for you. It depends, right? But, you have to look at what kind of platform you're on. Are you on an operational platform? Are you on a tactical platform? Because,
in the
military,
fire, or is
right?
it, yeah.
Because, obviously they can take far more liberty with restricting your constitutional rights when the mission is in jeopardy. For example, a good example is free speech. Well, I can't go spouting off a bunch of classified information to the enemy. I don't have that freedom of speech to be able to do that. The government can say to me, no, you're not going to do that. Or, they can restrict that. And that's for national security.
Right.
And so, yes, that does weigh in the balance if you're in the military and how that works. But, being able to lay out that constitutional analysis, and then the recommendation was, please always have an attorney with you when you're writing your policy that has to do with isolating or restricting people's movement.
Right,
so that
right.
you have the right people at the table.
Yeah,
so
so
it's not like a brilliant, recommendation, but there are things that sometimes you don't think about. And so that's why it's important that we have leadership where you have people who will exercise the skill sets that they have and come up with, helping be part of the solution rather than part of the problem.
Right.
So, do we run out of time?
No, we're not completely out of time. So, who do we have on last week? What's Matt
Mayberry.
Matt Mayberry. We had Matt Mayberry on, and when you get elected, I hope you will join him, because he's promising to reintroduce that bill that. Because this is a personal burr in my saddle, is I went out to visit Lee Quant, and I was on my way back on my motorcycle, and I got turned around, and I went over, and I looked up, and it said 495 next exit, which meant I was in Massachusetts. I have my gun on me and no helmet.
Oh, my gosh.
So they have a reason to pull me over, and I have a gun on me.
Right.
And so I turned my bike around, got out of there as quick as I could. But my point is...
Yes, I want universal carry across state lines.
Because your constitutional rights should not be
thwarted
as soon as you walk across an imaginary line.
And as far as I know, that's the only constitutional right that you lose when you cross that line.
Yeah, I think some state constitutions might be a little more restrictive or less restrictive than our state constitution, but, no, there's absolutely, I can get a driver's license in New Hampshire, and I can drive in Massachusetts, or I can drive wherever, and the presumption is that because I have this license, I can safely drive. And the same thing goes, with being a licensed, having a licensed firearm. The presumption is there's something to become licensed. You got it legally. You don't have a mental disorder that would prevent you from having it. You're not a felon.
How bad of a mental disorder?
Whatever their threshold is, right? And so you should be able to cross the state lines with that. So I would absolutely stand with Matt Mayberry. I'd stand with anybody. I'll introduce it if you want me to.
I do.
And I would introduce term limits. And even if term limits don't pass, I will self-impose term limits. Part of the problem in D.C. is those people have been there so long. I find it mind-boggling. I think I don't really know what a congressperson makes, but I think it's around $175,000 a year. How is it that you can make $175,000 a year and come out a millionaire? Explain that to me.
Well, not only that, you're making $175,000, but you've got to find a place to stay in D.C. because you can't commute every day.
No, when I lived in D.C., I did. When I was still in the military, so I kept my home here. So I was paying my mortgage here. My rent on my little 600 square foot apartment, I had a living room and a bedroom, and I had a bathroom and a little galley kitchen. I paid $1,700 a month for that.
And that's part of the reason why $175,000 a year is not way out of hand for a congressperson.
But I don't know how you become a millionaire on that.
Exactly. But that's to kind of offset, okay, you have what you would normally make, somewhere around six figures back home as an attorney or a nurse or whatever. And then let's tack on $75,000 for serving your country. And that should cover your expenses to pay your mortgage at home, pay your rent in D.C., and you should pretty much shouldn't have anything left. You don't become a millionaire
on that little bit that's left over.
Do they have because I'd love to see that number, how much money Nancy Pelosi was worth when she first ran for office compared to what she's worth now, or Ann Custer, or Pappas, probably not so much because he's only been in there a little while.
Foreign aid she sent home came back to her through Paul Pelosi's bank accounts.
Right.
But again, when you've been in an organization, one of the things they do in the military is they make you leave. You can be a commanding officer for 2 or 3 years, and then you got to move, right? Yeah, and part of that is because so you don't become stale, right? And you don't become corrupt. And yet we let you stay in Congress forever.
Let me ask you this. You're a captain, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so you're a captain in the military at X number of dollars a year,
yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
If all of a sudden you were worth $5 million, wouldn't the brass say, wait the heck a minute, what is going on?
We're not allowed to take money for stuff.
What Russian did she sell those lands to?
Right, and we're not allowed to take money for stuff. Like, I can't take gifts. You can't give me a gift. I can't take golf trips. You can't give me that stuff in the military because of my military service. So, we don't get paid to speak. We go speak. We do it for free. You can have reasonable expenses. I'll pay for your gas to get you here.
Right.
But you cannot charge to speak.
Right.
So I don't know how, but anyway. Well, thank you so much. You guys are always tremendous having me here. It's always a pleasure. It's great to be in a studio with human beings who aren't wearing masks.
Lynn, thank you very much for your service.
Thank you. I appreciate
it. Before we
it.
close up, again, how can they get in touch with you?
www.Blankenbeker, that's BLANKENBEKER. Check us out. We'd love to have your support. Hope we can earn your vote.
You can always just look it up on Google. It'll come up. Hey, thank you very much, folks. We'll see you next week.